Trump and Biden clash over coronavirus, China, and climate change in final debate. President Xi Jinping warns China will defeat all invaders on the 70th anniversary of Korean War. And China slams Britain over decision to go ahead with visas for B&O passport holders.
Good evening and welcome. Less chaos, but still plenty of clashes. For the second and final time, U.S. President Donald Trump and Democratic challenger Joe Biden faced off in a debate ahead of the November 3rd presidential election.
But this time, viewers got something they didn't get in the previous debate. A debate. A different venue, a change of dynamic, but mostly the same issues as the two bitter rivals tangled over taxes, climate change, China, and of course, what could be the singular defining issue for voters.
Begin with the fight against the coronavirus. President Trump, the first question is for you.
It's a worldwide pandemic. It's all over the world. We have a vaccine that's coming. It's ready. It's going to be announced within weeks.
We're about to go into a dark winter. And he has no clear plan, and there's no prospect that there's going to be a vaccine available for the majority of the American people before the middle of next year. Come on. There's not another serious scientist in the world who thinks it's going to be over soon.
I say we're learning to live with it. We have no choice. We can't lock ourselves up in a basement like Joe does.
He says that we're learning to live with it. People are learning to die with it.
For Biden, it was 90 minutes to solidify an apparent lead less than 2 weeks before the election. For Trump, the matchup was one of the final opportunities to reshape a race that national opinion polls show he has been losing for months. Trump claimed he helped avoid a war with North Korea by building a relationship with leader Kim Jong-un.
We have a different kind of a relationship. We have a very good relationship, and there's no war.
We had a good relationship with Hitler before he, in fact, invaded Europe.
With fewer disruptions and personal attacks, observers say the more restrained format may have worked in Trump's favor.
It makes him seem more normal, more presidential. So I think overall that was a win for him. I think for Vice President Biden, he withstood the debate very well, and I think he held his own.
They did have an actual debate. They did articulate what we already knew, which is that these are two very different figures.
Relatively few voters have yet to make up their minds. A record 47 million Americans have already cast ballots, eclipsing total early voting from the 2016 election. Closer to home, President Xi Jinping condemned unilateralism, protectionism, and extreme egoism during a ceremony to mark the 70th anniversary of China's entry into the Korean War. Comments were seemingly aimed at the United States, which fought on the side of South Korea alongside a UN coalition. China, on the other hand, sent troops to aid North Korean forces. Today's anniversary comes amid a deterioration in Sino-U.S. relations. The countries are currently engaged in numerous political and economic disputes. Beijing, however, remains North Korea's most important diplomatic ally and trading partner. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un reportedly paid respects to Chinese soldiers today at a cemetery north of Pyongyang. The visit was Kim's first to the cemetery on the anniversary of China's entry into the war.
China's foreign ministry is calling on the UK to correct its mistakes after details of a new visa for British national overseas passport holders was announced.
The new visa will allow B&O holders the right of abode and apply for citizenship in Britain. Caleb Leung has details.
A stern warning from China after the UK announced details of a pathway to citizenship for B&O passport holders. Urging the British government to immediately correct its mistakes, the Hong Kong office of China's foreign ministry told the UK to end the hypocrisy and stop political maneuvering. It reminded Britain that before the handover, the UK had explicitly promised not to grant B&O holders the right of abode. Beijing accused London of openly breaching its commitment with its latest arrangement. The foreign ministry emphasized that Hong Kong is a part of China and its affairs are China's internal affairs. Beijing says it will consider not recognizing the BNO passport as a valid travel document and reserves the right to take further measures. The accusations come after the UK announced the details of the new visa, which will be open for applications starting January 31st next year. Labeling it as a very generous offer, the UK is offering the visa to BNO holders and their family dependents. Holders of this new visa will have the right to work and study in the UK for 5 years and may apply for settled status afterwards. After a 6th year, they can apply for British citizenship. However, applicants will have to prove they can support themselves and their dependents financially for at least 6 months. A 5-year visa would cost £250 per person, while a 30-month version will cost £180. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
The city reported 4 new coronavirus cases today, bringing the tally to 5,284. Only one was a locally acquired infection. The patient is a 29-year-old male residing in Taiwan, Nam on Lamma Island. He's linked to a previous imported case. The 3 imported cases involve 2 men and a woman. They arrived from the US, Pakistan and India. 2 of them stayed at Dorset Chun Wan, Hong Kong and Best Western Plus Hotel, Kowloon.
Amid unprecedented shortages of flu shots in the city, the government says it will provide an extra 100,000 doses to the private medical sector.
Health authorities also allayed fears over the vaccine's safety after South Korea reported nearly 40 deaths with suspected links to flu shots over the past week. Haley Zhou has more.
With the winter flu season and a highly likely resurgence of COVID-19 infections approaching at the same time, people are scrambling to get a flu shot, and the city is running out of it.
We understand there is a cry for more flu vaccine in the private market. That's why government and the Department of Health have made special arrangements.
100,000 doses of flu vaccines will be injected into the private sector in phases by the end of the year. However, only the doctors who are registered with the government's vaccination schemes will receive them. They must not charge extra fees for providing those vaccines to eligible patients. The government also says a new batch of 85,000 jabs will arrive in Hong Kong by the end of November. Meanwhile, officials try to allay fears over the vaccine's safety after at least 36 people died after receiving a flu shot in South Korea. Health authorities in Seoul say no connection has been confirmed between the fatalities and the vaccines.
The vaccines concerned mainly came from some Korean manufacturers, and there was also a European company. That European company also supplied vaccines to Hong Kong, but we have checked with our local supplier of that French company, the local supplier, and they have confirmed that the concerned batch in Korea are not imported into Hong Kong.
Government vaccination programs will continue as planned, with the officials urging people to get vaccinated before the flu season starts, usually in January. Haley Zhou, TVB News.
The strong wind signal number 3 will remain in force tonight and for a period of time tomorrow. At 5 p.m., Typhoon Sodel was estimated to be about 490 kilometers south of the city. It will skirt roughly 550 kilometers south of the territory before heading gradually west. Stronger winds and 1 or 2 light rain patches are expected after dusk.
For the weather forecast tonight and tomorrow, it will be mainly cloudy with 1 or 2 light rain patches. Strong east to northeasterly winds, occasionally gale on high ground later. Seas will be rough with swells. Members of the public are advised to stay away from the shoreline and not to engage in water sports.
Pastor Peter Kuhn, who has been assisting murder suspect Chan Ton Kai, has appealed to the victim's mother for patience. In a message to the press, the pastor said Chan is still determined to turn himself in to Taiwanese authorities, but he wouldn't be able to meet her deadline because he hasn't been able to obtain a visa to enter the island, and he's also frustrated by the situation. The victim's mother earlier said she would not plead for Chan and asked the court for leniency if he fails to surrender by today. The pastor said Chan's lawyers have been reaching out to Taiwanese authorities but failed to arrange his trip to Taiwan.
And still to come on tonight's news. Local food and wine festival goes virtual in the age of COVID. 2 arrested and fired after going on a joyride in a KMB bus. And Goldman Sachs agrees to pay massive fine of role in Malaysian fund scandal.
Welcome back to TVB News. The pandemic is forcing organizers of the Wine and Dine Festival to get creative and hold the event online next month.
Officials say the new format will demonstrate the city can retain its status as a global food and beverage hub despite the ongoing health crisis. Pinky Wong has more.
Foodies will soon be able to enjoy gourmet food and wine at the Wine and Dine Festival held by the Hong Kong Tourism Board. But the event will be virtual, starting from November 11th to December 15th. Officials are optimistic about the event.
The launching of the Wine and Dine Festival this year through this format, both online and offline, is a good demonstration that Hong Kong can retain this brand name, Wine and Dine, that's in Hong Kong, as the global attraction of Hong Kong's uniqueness, being a wine center in selling and also a great entertainment center for good food. We will be building on these bubbles, local tour exemption, and also event like this to demonstrate to the world that, well, there is a way if there's a will, under the assumption that, well, we should be keeping ourselves safe.
There will also be online cooking lessons and wine tasting classes offered.
As far as the master class, you probably also know that Hong Kong remains the #1 market in the world for Bordeaux wines. It's the #1 export market. So that's why I decided to do a tasting of Bordeaux. Will be wines that cost less than 200 Hong Kong a bottle. This year's Hong Kong Wine and Dine Festival is going to be fantastic. It's actually going to reach more people through all other social media. And each week, I reach between 1 million and 2 million people around the world, and they know I'm in Hong Kong tasting wine.
The festival has been extended to 5 weeks compared to the usual 4 days. Pinky Wong, TVB News.
Subscriptions have opened for the government's new batch of I-bonds. Depending on market response, its $10 billion target issue size can be raised to $15 billion. Priced at $10,000 per lot, the inflation-linked retail bond comes with a 3-year tenor. Interest will be paid every 6 months at a rate of no less than 2%. Until November 5th, those interested may apply for the I-bond through a placing bank, securities broker, or the Hong Kong Securities Clearing Company. The bonds will be issued on November 16th and will be listed the next day.
Hong Kong residents between the ages of 60 and 64 may qualify from a $2 public transport fare concession next year. Currently, only people aged 65 or above are entitled to the discount. Chief Executive Carrie Lam suggested lowering the threshold back in January, but critics say there hasn't been any progress. Sources say the government has been working on the matter and plans to roll out the concessionary fare between 2021 and 2022. But there are reports that some in the administration are worried that expanding this scheme will drain the city's fiscal reserves. Still, the pro-establishment camp also urged the government to speed things up.
The demand is very large. This is because we know that our community has become many and many elders. But some elders, the age between 60 to 64, they, after retire, they cannot enjoy any benefit from our society. So that we ask for our government to look after them.
Well, police have arrested 2 young men on suspicion of driving away with a KMB double-decker bus in the middle of the night without permission.
It turns out the pair worked for KMB, which left the bus operator with no choice but to fire them. Police intercepted the bus which the pair used to go on a joyride just outside Chinese University this morning. Officers got onto the bus to investigate and collect evidence. It came just hours after KMB reported to the police that a bus originally parked at the Shouchun O terminus in Shatin went missing at 2 a.m. The bus operator then checked with its own computer system and found the missing bus was actually moving. Officers then tracked the vehicle using the global positioning system and spotted it on the move at the Ma Liu Shou section of Tai Po Road. They successfully stopped the bus outside of Chinese University and arrested 2 men. KMB says the vehicle involved is a crew bus. Initial investigations showed someone damaged the electric circuit to start the engines and the bus and removed the speed limit device. The double-decker has already been brought back to the depot for inspection. KMB stressed that it will not tolerate any acts of theft and will seriously follow up on the case. Meanwhile, the 2 employees have already been sacked. Police say the 2 men are 19 and 20 years old respectively. They were arrested on suspicion of taking the vehicle without authority, driving without a license, reckless driving and other offences. The police's Shatin District Division is currently on the case. A subsidiary of Goldman Sachs pled guilty on Thursday in a U.S. foreign corruption probe tied to a Malaysian sovereign wealth fund. The investment banking giant has agreed to pay nearly $3 billion in fines, compensation and penalties.
Several current and former top Goldman executives will also have to return millions of dollars in pay and bonuses. Daniel Rao reports.
This morning, the department filed criminal charges in New York against the Goldman Sachs Group and its Malaysian subsidiary, charging each with conspiracy to violate the anti-bribery provisions of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act.
Goldman Sachs Malaysia entered the guilty plea Thursday following charges in a Brooklyn federal court. The company admitted that it knowingly and willfully conspired to violate U.S. anti-bribery laws. Goldman will now have to fork out $2.9 billion in compensation payments to American as well as to overseas regulatory bodies. The firm had previously reached a $3.9 billion settlement with the government of Malaysia. Goldman Sachs's board of directors also decided to claw back pay and bonuses from top executives. Prosecutors allege that bond sales organized by Goldman Sachs allowed associates of former Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak to steal billions over several years. This from a fund set up by Razak in 2009 to accelerate Malaysia's economic development. The so-called 1MDB fund relied primarily on debt to fund investment and development projects. U.S. investigators allege at least $4.5 billion was stolen from the fund and laundered by his associates. Public anger over the corruption allegations contributed to the shocking election defeat of Najib's long-ruling coalition back in May 2018. Locally, Goldman Sachs's Asian unit was fined $350 million by Hong Kong's financial regulator, the SFC, over its role in the scandal. Daniel Rao, TVB News.
France has extended curfews to around 2/3 of its population. The move came as COVID-19 infections in the country continue to spike. A curfew had already been implemented in Paris and 8 other major cities last week. French Prime Minister Jean Castex announced yesterday that it would be extended to 38 more departments in a bid to stamp out the spread of COVID-19. This means 46 million of the country's 67 million population will now be confined to their homes from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. Shortly after the measures were announced, French health authorities reported a record 41,622 newly confirmed coronavirus cases, bringing the cumulative total to nearly 1 million. And that's the news for tonight. Thanks for watching.
Good night.